Greetings, subscribers! I hope you're all enjoying October as best as you can. A new Halloween movie of Michael Myers called Halloween Kills was originally supposed to be released this week. However, due to the coronavirus, the release date has been pushed back to 2021. By the way, I of course hope all of you, all your families, and everyone are doing okay during COVID. Anyway, I thought some people might be interested in Halloween movies at this time. So today, I thought I'd look back on all Halloween movies and vote either thumbs up or down, Siskel Ebert style. What I'm going to say today is only my opinion, and it's always possible I could change my mind someday. Nevertheless, I'd like to tell you my opinions on this day. A warning, there will be some spoilers, and with that said, I'd like to get started. 1978's Halloween. This movie is a classic. I overall love it. I will say I think the script is actually surprisingly weak. If I could sit down with someone who's never seen the movie, but simply wants to hear me give a plot description, then I really don't have much of an interesting story to tell. But this movie creates a feeling it gives you while you watch it. In one moment, I almost feel the wind coming in through the windows. There's great camera work, great lighting, and a great musical score, all of which work really well together. It often gives you that feeling of knowing you're correct to be scared when nobody else around you seems scared. It has some startles, but the slow creepiness is the most effective part. This is not to mention what an excellent performance we get from actor Donald Pleasence. This movie has rightfully earned its place as a horror classic. I absolutely vote thumbs up. 1981's Halloween 2. This movie was not as good and effective as the original, but it didn't need to be. It still recaptured a lot of the feel I liked from the first movie. It elaborated on the story of the first film, explaining one major thing which I felt was left unclear. We had a lot more screen time from Donald Pleasence as Dr. Loomis, a lot less from Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode. And this movie spent much of its time in the hospital. Anyway, I have no doubt that I'd vote thumbs up for this movie. 1982's Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. This is hardly a sequel. The story has nothing to do with any story from the previous two films. No Michael Myers or any character from the previous Halloween movies. I'll admit that got things off to a bad start for me, but watching and trying to be open, it still does not work for me. The story about Halloween masks eating people's heads after they watch TV just does not interest me. I find it neither scary nor fun. There are no characters I find really interesting, no performances I find very memorable, despite the fact that I've enjoyed actor Tom Atkins' performances in some other movies. It's pretty clear that I'm going to give this movie thumbs down. 1988's Halloween 4 The Return of Michael Myers. The title says it all about which villain is back. As a continuation of Halloween 2, this movie gets off to a pretty ridiculous start. When Halloween 2 ended, we saw that Dr. Loomis sacrificed himself to kill Michael and save Laurie. But here, based on which actors they could get to return, it's Laurie who died and Loomis who's still alive. They tried to explain it by saying Dr. Loomis didn't quite die in that explosion, and Laurie did live but happened to die a few years later. Yes, that's all pretty stupid, but once you get past that, this actually turns into a really good movie. The story is that Laurie Strode had a daughter, Jamie Lloyd. It's much about her getting adopted by a new family, developing a close relationship with her adoptive older sister Rachel, and it all works very well. And Jamie Lloyd was played quite well by young actress Danielle Harris. The filmmakers clearly studied the original movie very carefully. It wasn't just the return of Michael Myers, the return of Donald Pleasence, the return of the music. The tone was recaptured. But there were other great new elements that were added as well. I loved the scene of Michael chasing Jamie and Rachel as they crawl across the rooftop. I love all the chases. Without a doubt, I vote thumbs up for this movie. 1989's Halloween 5 The Revenge of Michael Myers. This movie continued the story of Jamie Lloyd, but didn't work nearly as well as the previous movie. First, things get off to a bad start with the way the writers try to worm their way out of how the previous movie ended. One thing that ending showed us was the shock that after Michael Myers died, Jamie Lloyd became the new killer herself. But now in this movie, although she's psychologically traumatized, she's by no means vicious, but just a nervous wreck. Also, the previous movie's ending had Michael Myers fall into a hole, explosives were dropped down on him, he died. But here, this movie explained that he actually crawled out the hole before the explosions were dropped, he went into somebody's house, passed out, and then woke up a year later. Okay? Is it just me, or is that completely ridiculous? If someone who looked like Michael Myers just walked into my house and passed out, I wouldn't just leave him there for a year. Anyway, not only did things get off to a bad start, but the whole movie from there on seems ineffective. Jamie's adopted sister Rachel gets killed early in the movie, and then they try to show Jamie having the same relationship with one of Rachel's friends in an attempt to fill the shoes of Rachel's role, and I don't think the chemistry is nearly as strong. Also, there's a whole sequence about returning to the old Myers house, and apparently, the filmmakers expected us to just not notice that this is a completely different looking house than we saw of the Myers house in the first movie. I mean, I understand they couldn't use the exact same house because this was shot in a different area. Okay, I understand that. But couldn't the location scouts have made some effort to look for a house with at least some similarities? Anyway, there's this whole factor that Jamie now has ESP abilities with no explanation where she got them from. I find that the characters and stories are uninteresting, there are not many really memorable moments. There's a few appearances by some man who we never even learn who he is, it's just hinted that his mystery will be answered in the next sequel. This movie might have had a few moments which I find mediocre at best, but overall, it's pretty clear that I have to give this movie thumbs down. 1995's Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. This movie shows Jamie Lloyd, now older and played by a different actress, having a baby shortly before getting killed. And this also shows us Tommy Doyle, the little boy Laurie Strode babysat for in the first film, now grown up and played by a different actor, one who actually went on to become quite famous, Paul Rudd. And he's quite effective in this role. We get to see Donald Pleasence as Dr. Loomis one last time before the actor passed away, and his acting is still as good as ever. This film was not very popular with fans, largely because the script came up with new explanations for why Michael never died in the previous movies, very different from what fans believed. These explanations involved a story about doctors who were secretly part of a Satan-worshipping cult under the hospital, but I actually found it to be a very good explanation. At the same time, a lot of the suspense in this movie was only okay. While I've mentioned some performances are good, many others are weak. The directing could have been better, and this was done on a lower budget than you might expect. I realize this was not very popular with fans, and I realize it does have its problems, but honestly, I enjoy enough of it to vote thumbs up. 1998's Halloween H2O 20 years later. This film was somewhat of a reboot. It continues the story of the first two Halloween movies, but it ignores parts 4, 5, and 6, and obviously ignores part 3. Although the filmmakers claimed it was only a sequel to the first film, they didn't seem to realize they were following the events of the second movie, even though this movie even opens with the song Mr. Sandman by the Chordettes, which was played when Halloween 2 ended. The story here is that Laurie Strode faked her death, had a son, and now lives and works at a boarding school which her son attends. This was made on a much higher budget than the last few sequels, and was directed with more style, and went for a pretty different tone. It was obviously trying to imitate the style of the movie Scream, which had just been released 2 years earlier, and was a smash hit. But at least this movie sort of acknowledged the Scream influence, by briefly showing Scream on TV at one moment. Anyway, did I enjoy this movie? Personally, no, I did not. I will admit that as soon as it got started, I felt biased against it because I didn't like the way it ignored the previous sequels, many of which I enjoyed. But I realize I have to judge this movie for what it is, and I still had a lot of problems with it. I felt that the setting of taking place almost entirely in a boarding school, while most of the kids were not there, left the fun limited. I also thought Jamie Lee Curtis was the only cast member to give a really good performance, but I still didn't feel she was nearly as good as Donald Pleasence in the other sequels. I also felt that the characters and the chemistry were weaker than these were in Halloween 4, so I see no reason this series had to be rebooted. I did recognize the director's imitation of Scream, and I did not enjoy that. I liked Scream better. I think this movie's target audience was young teenagers who had just seen Scream, heard the Halloween references, and were not willing to go back and watch 5 older Halloween movies, but could watch just the first one, and now this, which was then, the new one. So clearly this movie was not for me. I hardly enjoyed it, therefore I would vote thumbs down. 2002's Halloween Resurrection. This is a sequel to H2O, but aside from Laurie Strode returning and getting killed at the beginning, there are no returning characters other than Michael Myers. While I gave H2O a thumbs down, I can see why some people might like it. However, I really can't see why anyone would like this one. No interesting characters, no good scare tactics, nothing entertaining. Aside from Busta Rhymes giving one good laugh at the end of the film, there's nothing here I enjoy. This is definitely my least favorite Halloween movie ever. I don't even want to talk about it. I'll just say, thumbs down. 2007's Halloween, the remake directed by rock star Rob Zombie. The first half of this movie was like a prequel to the first Halloween movie, exploring Michael Myers' backstory. Then the second half was a remake. It's my understanding that when this film was in early development, the producers debated if it should be a prequel or a remake, and settled on making it a bit of both. Anyway, when I look back at the earlier Halloween movies, I do not buy this as a backstory for the Michael Myers that I saw there. The original Michael was simply a psycho with evil in his soul, and there was no human explanation for his evil. But here, they tried to say his evil was all a response to traumatic experiences he went through as a child. So my feeling is, if you're going to look at this as a partial prequel to the previous Michael Myers movies, then no, I do not enjoy it. However, if you're going to look at this as a reboot or a standalone reimagining of the Michael Myers story, which is really what it's supposed to be, then it's not bad. It's all a solid story, competently made, some good performances, and there's lots of cameos from other actors from classic horror movies as a treat for horror fans. And seeing Danielle Harris, who played Jamie Lloyd in Halloween 4, now grown up playing Annie, Laurie's best friend, was another treat. So between the solid movie this is, and all the nods to other horror movies, then the end, I can give this movie thumbs up. 2009's Halloween 2, the sequel to the Rob Zombie remake. The first 20 minutes or so start with Laurie in the hospital, seeming as much like a remake of the 1981 sequel as a sequel to the 2007 remake. But then that turns out to just be a dream sequence, and the movie goes on to its own story. Although I don't find it to be a very interesting story. A lot of the images look more like they belong in a music video than a movie. A lot of the plot pacing is dragged out. A lot of the dialogue seems completely meaningless. A lot of the story of Michael and Laurie seeing the same hallucinations does not really make sense to me. This movie actually has a few moments which I interpret as tiny nods to Halloween 4 and 5, but not as effective here. I really did not enjoy this film. I think it's clear that I'm going to vote thumbs down. 2018's Halloween. This is a sequel to the original 1978 movie, ignoring every other Halloween movie, including 1981's Halloween 2. So here, even the story about Michael and Laurie being siblings is gone. And just to make things more confusing, they gave this movie the same title as the original. It's simply called Halloween. They couldn't even call it Halloween 2018 or find any way to give it its own name. So we now have an original, a remake, and a sequel, all with the exact same title. How do they even expect fans to talk about these movies? Well, I loved Halloween. I didn't really like Halloween, but then Halloween was pretty good. Anyway, As someone who's seen all the Halloween movies, it gives me a headache to even try to keep track of how many times the series has been rebooted, how many things I'm supposed to remember, and how many things I'm supposed to forget. I mean, the second Halloween movie revealed that Laurie and Michael were biological siblings, and it made sense. That was a part of Halloween 4, 5, and 6. Then even when things were rebooted with H2O, that was a major part of the story. And with the Rob Zombie reboot, that was a major part of the story. But now with this movie, it all goes out the window. Though I have to be honest, was this movie well done in its own way? Yes, it actually was. It did have good characters, good story, atmosphere, and some scares. So I don't know what to say. I hate this film's name. I hate the fact that the story is rebooted yet again. I think I hate everything about this movie except for the actual movie itself. That was pretty good. So in the end, I do have to give this movie thumbs up. Okay, so what can I say? I know a lot of you will disagree with me, but these are only my opinions at this moment in time. But I realize I'm not the sole audience member, so if you disagree with any of my opinions, then please tell me why in the comments below. Please try to change my mind. I hope to read comments that will get me to see these movies in a whole new way. And regardless whether you've agreed or disagreed with me, I hope you've enjoyed this video and will please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell. I would love to have you. Thank you, and happy Halloween.